Welcome to another episode of Shots from the Winchester podcast, where we explore leadership topics from a variety of perspectives. This podcast is brought to you by Greencastle Consulting, your nation's premier strategy execution firm. You know, it's hard to balance things when things are falling apart, and how do you lock in? How do you be that leader for people, especially if you have a team under you that is struggling in this way, and so this is one of the topics that I approached you with. You was like, this is me. So let's jump in. Jeff Heavener.
Hey,
thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Al. Pleasure
to
be here.
Yeah, really appreciate it. I don't know if you know this or not. Yes, you have to.
I'll pretend I do if I don't. Go ahead. You put me on the spot.
At our last Vet Fest, somebody was like, Aaron Rodgers. I saw God. Aaron Rodgers.
So, we'll segue for 1 minute. So that name, obviously, I'm older than Aaron by I think 3-4 years. I don't know. So that name had been following me around since he came on the scene in the NFL.
Yeah.
And honestly, I hadn't even heard of the kid when he came into the NFL. It was one of my coworkers posted a picture in my cubicle one day, and I'm like, and I thought that was me. They just cropped long hair because he came in the NFL with long hair, and I'm like, who the hell? Anyway, fast forward all these years later, and yes, there's a lot of similarities, facial expressions, whatever. So I get it a lot in crowded places, and I'll get it to the point where people think I'm lying to them that I'm not Aaron Rodgers because I just don't want to sign an autograph.
Right.
And I'll throw two hilarious moments. Mm-hmm. One, I was at a PGA Tour. And I was up in the grandstands with a company I was at the time. They hosted one of the big tents, so we were up high watching over the tee box.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been to a PGA tournament, people enjoy themselves immensely. So there was one gentleman that just swore I was him and would not let it go. And I said, finally, I was like, "You're right. Just come here." Sign. I didn't know how to sign Aaron Rodgers. I signed it. So Aaron, if you're listening, buddy, hey, let's get a beer. Second time, I was in Punta Cana with my wife. This was a vacation, the two of us, and we're having a great time. And we rented one of those swim out rooms, right? Had their own little private swim out pool.
That's awesome.
And the whole week, my wife loves people watching, and she loves it when people look at me and she knows what they're thinking. So they're thinking he's somebody else, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So she tells me this group of women that were down there together on this trip, kept looking at me.
Yeah.
And they're like, I guarantee they think you're Aaron Rodgers. I'm like, whatever. Until they come up and ask, just ignore them.
Yeah.
So anyway, we get back to our room. It was shortly after lunch. We were coming back from the beach. Yeah, we had lunch on the beach coming back where she's in there showering or something. I'm in the pool just kind of lounging, and this woman, again intoxicated, jumps the hedges. So there's a little private row of hedges that kind of keep some separation from these
bold.
Private pools.
Yeah.
Jumps into my little private pool. And at this point, I'm like, well, it doesn't look like she's trying to hurt me.
Right.
And she's like, quick, take the picture. And she puts her arm around me.
Oh my God.
And the whole girl group's cracking up. And my wife now can see me outside with this woman in the pool with me. And I'm like,
this is not the way it looks,
babe. So anyway, yes. It has gotten out of hand. So
that's insane. No, that's
it's
hilarious.
Comical. Yeah,
That's hilarious.
Anyway, we've digressed enough. So yes, I get it. I get it a lot, and I try to put it down. And sometimes it just doesn't.
Well, you be the judge out there. Leave a comment if you think he looks like Aaron Rodgers. I honestly, I saw a picture of you. I think we posted in our team chat. And they said Aaron Rodgers, blah, 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 and it was they put the picture up there. And I'm familiar with Aaron Rodgers, but I don't stare at him. I don't look at him all the time, And then when I saw the comparison, I was just like, holy mackerel. There is some really close, that is your doppelganger.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy. And I never met the man. Yeah. I'll shake his hand if I do, and I'll say, hey, thanks for looking like me.
Yeah.
Because I'm a couple of years older than you.
Yeah. That is the truth.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, that's fun. Thanks for putting that out there. That's great. All right. Well, let's dive in. Let's talk about leading through chaos.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would imagine you have some examples of that. Now, you were in the what branch of the service were you
Navy.
in? Navy.
Yep.
Navy, that's right. What rank were you when you...
I left at an E5.
E5?
So second
Okay.
class petty officer.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have some stories to talk about because you are how tall? 6'4"?
6'7".
6'7".
Yeah.
Wow, I was
Yeah.
way
I'd
off.
stand up, but I'd probably get cut off on the camera right now just to show everybody.
Yes.
So I'm sure I know where this is going next. But go ahead. Preface, foreshadowing. 6'7".
So 6'7", and you managed to get stationed on a submarine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uncle Sam had a cruel joke, but yes.
All right, let's dive into that.
Dive into
we're gonna
that.
dive.
All right.
We're gonna diverge again.
So anybody in the Navy would understand this, and I don't know if all branches do the same, but when you're finishing your schooling, whether you're an officer or an enlisted guy, we nicknamed it the dream sheet, right? So it's like you get to fill out your top 3 choices, whether that's a specific ship or boat, and there is a difference.
Yeah.
Boats are subs, ships are surface. Either a location like a port or a coast, right? So you get something out of that mix.
Yeah.
Because again, you've been in the military, you know there's never a guarantee. Once you raise that right hand, it's like wherever they need you, you end up going.
You just land there.
But anyway, so I had finished my last schooling. I was in upstate New York, and I desperately wanted San Diego. And I wanted the port in San Diego, and I wanted to be on a new ship that was going to San Diego. So my father was in the Navy for about 4 years, and all I heard stories was surface ships, carriers, frigates, just seeing the sun, the moon, the stars. It just sounded like old school sailing to me that you can at least get in today's Navy.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, lo and behold, I get my orders and I see, I was expecting CVN, which is carrier vessel nuclear. I was a trained nuclear engineer. So I had to go, I was limited in the options I had from a fleet perspective. And so I get my orders and I see SSN. And I'm like, well, I knew what the designator was, subsurface nuclear. And I'm like, again, 6'7".
Yeah.
I said, so I go knocking on my commanding officer's door and I said, hey, sir, just you got a minute, want to understand this? Is this a typo? I see San Diego, but I don't see a carrier.
Yeah.
And he said, son, he's like, you were the only person in your graduating class that got San Diego.
Yeah.
And there's a long waiting list behind you. So if you don't want it, there's plenty of people that'll take it from you. And I said, nope. Good. It's the last you're going to hear from me. So for anybody who doesn't know, the subservice, technically you should be psych evaluated, right? You're supposed to at least make sure that you're not going to go crazy underwater for months on end.
Right.
And so anyway, I wasn't, but Uncle Sam was like, screw it, dude, this is the only way you're getting there. And I said, okay. And to make it, I wouldn't say worse, because it actually ended up being one of the most amazing experiences of my life. But the sub I was on was a fast attack, which is even smaller, right?
Oh,
so there are bigger submarines out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fast attacks at the time, the Navy had some smaller subs in that, but they're not widely used. And so from a fleet perspective, you basically had fast attacks and your ballistics and stuff like that. So anyway, it was small. Crew was about 120. And it wasn't many places I could stand upright. Beds I could not fit on.
Yeah.
I hugged a torpedo for about 6 months as a bed partner, because that was the only spot. They literally put a rack down in the torpedo room for me.
Wow.
Because it was the only spot that my head and feet could stretch over the normal rack space.
Oh,
so.
wow.
I was also pretty junior at the time. They thought it was comical. But,
Sleep with the torpedoes.
So yeah,
that's wild.
But yeah, so no, that was my entree into the sub life, and yeah, it ended up being met some of the most amazing guys. Still to this day, some of my best friends.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm going to be seeing a couple here in a couple weeks.
Nice.
But yeah, so no. Yeah.
That's funny.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because when you told me that story earlier, I was like, wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
Especially with as tall as you are and being in that. And now knowing that it was a fast attack sub, that's even more small. That's wild, man. That's really wild. Well, based on your experience, I'm sure you've seen some chaos and you've had to lead through it. So let me throw this at you. Let's start with strategy and decision making, or as far as like leading through chaos. So how can leaders make effective decisions when faced with incomplete or rapidly changing information?
there's a lot of different principles you can live by, right? You've heard the 80-20 principle.
Yeah.
You've heard, just hard facts, make decisions fast, whatever, right? The military will certainly train you for certain things, but then there's certain life situations, just happen. You learn by happenstance.
Yeah.
I've always looked at it from who am I trying to communicate to?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What information are they going to need from me to be successful in a chaotic environment? And if I don't have all the information, I've got to be at least confident in what I know so that I can go give direction, right?
Right.
And yes, sometimes that may not be the right choice immediately, but the only way that's really going to work, and you're going to see this as a constant theme through some of the answers, is trust and consistency.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If you haven't built that as a leader in your team, then any decision you make is going to be looked under a microscope.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So if you have trust and you're consistent in the way you lead your team, no one's going to fault you because they know what to expect.
Yeah.
So obviously this could be challenging in your first entry into a new team and you're plopped in there. But so I'd say in those scenarios for anybody, it's just earn trust as quick as possible and just be consistent in your leadership style. And hopefully by this point, you're learning that. And don't get me wrong, you're going to make mistakes regardless.
Right, right.
But just the best thing you can do at that point is just when you make that mistake, own up to it, integrity, just stand in front of the crowd and be like, hey, man, I messed up. I should have done this, but this is the information I had, so we had to go in a direction, right?
Yeah.
The worst thing you do is wait, right? The worst thing you do is hold back and wait for information before you make a call, make a decision. I'm not saying every scenario is so chaotic that you don't have some opportunity of time.
Right.
A lot of that is perceived. So that's another important part about leadership is when do you need to make that decision?
Right.
You're going to find in your time leading, whether it's in corporate America or still in the military or even at home with family, there's going to be this perceived time pressure. And chances are you're putting it on yourself. Unless there's already a very well communicated plan or there's a client or a customer or somebody's telling you I need a decision by this time.
Right.
So outside of that, it is a perceived time pressure. So balance that as you can. I also would suggest at any point in time, hopefully don't ever try to make these kind of decisions in a silo. If you have people that you can trust, if they're trusting you, it's a sounding board. I'd also say you got to be careful in those environments too, that those people understand that you're asking them to be a sounding board for advice, that you're not asking them for the answer.
Right.
That is ultimately your job as the leader is to make that decision. So the accountability does fall on you, but that doesn't mean you can't ask, right? As a leader, you have to be vulnerable at certain points in time to say, I don't know all the answers. Right. My job isn't to know all the answers. My job is to put people around me who either do or know how to get to the information faster than I can. So we can cohesively work as a more efficient group. Right. So, but yeah, I mean, we could talk all day on that specific subject because, again, that's a thread of what we're talking about. But trust, consistency in the way you lead. And you're going to find that regardless of how you come to your decisions, you're going to need to pivot again. And if the team trusts you and knows where you're going next, okay, hopefully that pivot isn't a backwards pivot. Hopefully it's kind of this zigzaggy, but you're still going in the right direction. Right. And so, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do with what you have. But yes, I mean, at the end of the day, make sure whatever information you do have, just try to make sure it's legit information. Right. Don't ever make decisions off of emails. Those are the worst. Make a phone call, have a conversation. Whatever you got to do. But so.
In this culture, a lot of people, it's like a hustle culture. So there's so much, so many ways that we communicate, text messages, emails, phone calls, and with the different generations, we just had a podcast episode about multi-generational workforces, and different generations have a tendency of communicating differently, like someone to text message you or IM you, others want to email, and if you break it down from Gen Z to baby boomers, there's also a difference in work ethic. And there's a lot to say there as far as working, especially under chaotic situations with communication. In that scenario, how would someone, and I know this is a question somebody might be asking out here in the audience right now, how does someone build that trust with people? Especially if you're a new person, you're coming in, like you just mentioned, you're new, you're coming into this team, brand spanking new. Mm-hmm. How do you build that trust?
Yeah. I've always found what's an effective way to do that quickly, right, is you have one-on-one conversations as soon as you enter into a new leadership positions.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's with direct reports. Sometimes it's, skip level. Maybe you got to go down one. But at a minimum with your immediate reports, right? And that conversation has to have a few key questions. Is what is your preferred method of communication? Mm-hmm. And not only what's your preferred method, but in situations where there's urgency and immediate attention.
Yeah.
Like what is the easiest way that I know you're going to respond if I have a question that needs an answer like pronto?
Yeah.
Second, what motivates you, right? Because if there's an emergent need, if there's a chaos environment that we're going into, how am I going to talk to you that I know I can express it in a way that's going to motivate you to get out of this with me, right? Mm-hmm. So what motivates you? And then at the end of the day, I want to know how do you like to be recognized? Mm-hmm. Because if we're going to get into a chaotic environment, hopefully it's not because of something that anybody did wrong, that just something happens.
Right.
And typically at the end of the day, somebody did something phenomenal out of that, or there was a massive lesson learned that somebody came across. So I want to recognize the people involved. One, for the hard work they put in, because these chaotic environments that you enter into, sometimes they're not short-lived. Sometimes they're days on end.
Yeah. That
you're trying to battle through something. And so people put a lot of hard sweat, work into this, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the third question is, how do you like to be recognized? Because not everybody likes to be publicly recognized.
Right.
So yes, there's going to be people who like the limelight and want to be the shining star because they're trying to make a name for themselves. Awesome. I will do that in the right way.
Right.
I'm not going to give you credit over somebody else. Mm-hmm. But then again, if that's not, I won't do that.
Right.
I will make sure the powers that be know who it was.
Yeah.
Because, credit needs to be where it's due, but I'm not going to put it out in a public environment, right?
Right.
So that way the person gets credit for what they achieved and so forth. So those three key questions I ask anytime I enter into a new leadership position. There's an array of other questions, because at least with those three starts a conversation.
Yeah.
And with a conversation you gain comfortableness. And with comfortableness, you get openness. And with openness, you can start to learn about each other, and you can start to build trust. So, but with all of those things, and if you know how they communicate, how they prefer communication is, again, what motivates them at the end of the day, and how they like to be recognized, you're building, again, this constant thread of this trust.
Yeah.
They're learning how you lead in consistency. And as long as you are practicing that, they've told you these things now, practice it. Then you're going to get people that are going to respond. And you're going to get people that trust you. And it's not immediate, but again, as you go through that process and ask those questions, you find that generationally doesn't really matter anymore, because again, it's all in how the person is, right? Yeah. You may have a baby boomer or a Gen X, but sometimes they don't fall into that stereotypical piece.
Right.
And you're not going to know that. And you can't assume that just because of how they look, how they dress. We're always taught as leaders, never, don't judge a book by the cover.
Yeah.
Read the book.
Yeah.
Right. And the only way you're going to read the book is you got to open it up. And you got to ask the questions.
Yeah.
So,
Wow, that's extraordinary. Thank you so much for that. It popped into my head too, and was like, how do you get that trust? And that's a beautiful way to do it. That's awesome. So another thing for morale, for instance, morale and motivation. We were just talking about motivation. What are some of the practical ways to keep employees engaged and motivated when the business is struggling?
Yeah, as leaders, this is a tough one. Nobody wants to lead an organization that constantly just feels like it's down in the dumps. And I've been in organizations like that, and not to say it lived forever, but it's tough when you're there, because it makes it very hard to get you out of that, right?
Yeah.
And the Friday pizza party doesn't help anymore, when everyone's there and it's like, okay, cool.
Casual Fridays.
Right. You know, the Hawaiian Shirt Friday idea now. Just, but no, so there is. I'm not going to say there's one answer to this, but what I have found is it goes back to a little bit deeper, that what is the camaraderie that you've built, right? Because you look at any, and I'll use the term loosely, but we call it like our war stories from our military days, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has gone through something where it was a sucky period of time, but for some reason, there's some of the best stories.
Yeah.
You get back with those buddies and you're laughing, you're cracking up, or even when you're growing up with family, it's like, man, that was a maybe not the best time in life, but man, we came out of it. Look at all, and you just laugh about it now.
Right.
So, you have to find that camaraderie, right? And if you can't find the camaraderie, there is a knot that ties everybody together.
Yeah.
And as a leader, we have to find that. And yes, it gets harder the larger the group gets that you're leading.
Yeah.
But at the same token, again, I'll go back to the trust piece is, you may not have all the trust right away. And you may not have all the camaraderie right away because you haven't been there long enough, or you didn't go through this certain period of time with that group.
Yeah.
Or maybe the mission they went on, or whatever the case may be. But you still have to find a way to build that.
Right.
And so when you're in those periods where it does feel like a slump and you're down and the morale's low, the best I can say is just you got to huddle the team. You've got to communicate.
Yeah.
And you've got to help them understand that, hey, all of this is not forever.
Yeah.
And whatever we're going through right now, we may not have all the answers. Sometimes it is because of something else the organization is doing as a whole, or there's other circumstances involved that we can't control. But this kind of goes back to some of those diagrams that you see, like, hey, here's your sphere of influence, right?
Yeah.
What can you control and what can't you control? And if you can't control that, I know it's easier said than done, but just let it go.
Yeah.
Like you can't, if you keep pinging and focusing and driving in on that, and that's all you're thinking about, and that's, we're coming in today, the plant's down today, oh, we can't finish this, oh, now we're stuck here again.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. We're all here together though.
Right.
That's the camaraderie piece.
Right.
Like I've missed holidays, I've missed dinners, I've missed, birthday parties because of just the work demands sometimes. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I enjoyed it or loved it.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you've got your new little war story with your team now.
Right.
And, all you can do is just encourage them, hey, piece by piece, step by step, we will get through this.
Yeah.
I'm here with you. I'm consistent. I want to lead the way I need to lead. And sometimes, as a leader, I'm not a big fan of this saying, but rolling up the sleeves kind of thing. I don't always agree with that. As a leader, I can't roll up my sleeves and go do the work sometimes that my team does because I may not know it.
Right.
But as a leader, I can certainly be there.
Yeah.
I can be over your shoulder, not in a micromanagement way, but I'm here supporting you. What do you need?
Yeah.
How do you need to be successful? I can be the person running or do whatever, in case that scenario happens.
Right.
A good example, one of my careers I was in medicine, nuclear medicine. And we had one of the world's largest proton therapy centers down here in Philly.
Yeah.
And so if you ever talk about a rewarding experience of work where you're treating cancer every day and watching people ring a bell on the way out the door, after like 6-7 weeks of treatment, like that hits you, man. Like that is real. You see it. You see the patients when they come in and you see them when they're healthy, when they're coming out.
Yeah.
And to be a part of that mix, there is no real word I could use to describe that feeling.
Yeah.
But on the other end of that, when you are responsible for all the equipment that's treating these patients and the doctors and the families and the therapists and the physicians and the physicists that are helping put these plans together.
Right.
And my job and my team's job is to keep the equipment running. And sometimes it breaks.
Yeah.
Right. And it breaks at the most inopportune time.
Right.
And it is a heartfelt emotion that you now have because you're seeing families like distraught and you're seeing doctors starting to get frazzled.
Yeah.
That you as a leader have to maintain composure. Like that, number one, if you are frazzled and you show that, not to say you need to lie about confidence,
right,
but you always have to have that front that it may not be perfect, but we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. We talk about emotional intelligence here too.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going all over the map here, but get back to the point at hand is it's that piece. It's that camaraderie. You've got to be able to communicate that in an effective way. And again, you're not going to have it immediately, but the best thing you can do is just kind of find those ways to link the group together.
Yeah.
Pull them out of it. And again, goes back to like that conversation I had earlier about like what motivates you, right? You're
Yeah.
gonna know what motivates each individual, but as a group as a whole, like hopefully there's a common thread.
Yeah.
And you can find that, and you can help lead by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like projects, right? Like what we do here at Greencastle. It's by definition, a project has an end. Right?
Yeah.
It's not infinite,
Right.
and so problems are not infinite. They will end.
Yeah.
So it's just what can you focus on, what can you control, and let's get through it together. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a really fun story to talk about. Like you might have some scars, but those scars are going to teach you lessons in life, and you just got to be thankful for them.
It's just dawned on me too. It'll be a fun topic. Business war stories.
Yeah, you could write a whole book about this stuff.
Yeah, like what do people go through? There's a lot of people that are, I'm sure, that listen to this podcast who are military veterans or business owners, CEOs, what have you, managers, who have had these situations, who've had these situations where they've had to figure out how to get their team motivated again, or maybe some bad news came through, or anything like that, and it's hard to pivot.
You're making decisions based on the information that you have,
right?
And sometimes it doesn't always work out, and the best you can do is just, all right, hey, what's the new information today?
Yeah.
How do I and my team help fix this scenario? And if it's that crushing where it could potentially derail a company, then now you're in some time crunch and you've got to make some decisions pretty rapidly.
Yeah.
You may not have all the information you need to do it, but the best you can do, because you've got some experience by this point, and even if you don't, it's take whatever thread of information that you have.
Yeah.
And if the biggest thing you can do at that point is it accurate?
Yeah.
And make the call, and just know, don't make a call so dramatic or knee-jerk that could derail you in a further direction, right? I keep talking about that zigzag.
Yeah.
Don't where you're going to drop and go backwards, right? Just if you can make a decision, you're confident in the decision you're going to make, just make sure that decision at least is going to put you in the right direction.
Yeah.
It may not be the right path, but it's in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
it's great having this conversation with you. The what you just put out, especially as far as like leaders, how to build trust, that's really important. And I think that's really good content for our audience out there. So anybody that's out there listening, definitely leave a comment, continue this conversation in the chat below. Put some likes on this stuff. Let us know that you like this kind of content so that we can make more of it. And if you have ideas for more content similar to this, let us know. Drop something down in the comments for us and everything. Do you have anything else? Do you want to give a shout out to anybody?
My beautiful wife, Denise. I know the last time we recorded something, I said a comment that she was like, oh my God, I can't let that get through. So love you, babe. I love coming home after work. I don't like staying here all the time. So I owe that one to her.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
All right, man. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.
And you guys, check us out in the next episode. Talk to you later.
All right. See you.